I'm with Bob Peoples, Executive Director of CARE, the Carpet America Recovery Effort. Bob, it's great to have you back.
Well, thanks, Dave. It's good to see you. It's great to be back, and Happy New Year to all your viewers.
And Happy New Year to you.
Thank you.
Now, I want to ask you about the CARE annual report. But first, in terms of 2015, how did CARE do at achieving its goals and making headway that you had hoped to do?
Well, I would tell you, Dave, 2015 started out with a lot of promise, but became a very challenging year. Ultimately, I would say there's one word that really explains the challenges we face today, and that's oil. In particular, the price of oil. I think most of your viewers know that the materials that go into making these products are derived from a barrel of oil, and when oil drops, the price of virgin materials drop, and as a result, puts severe pressure on the price of recycled materials. And it's not unique to carpet. It's impacting every recycled commodity on the planet today. In fact, it's doing a lot of damage to the recycling efforts.
So as we're seeing, even as we're sitting here today, the price falling to new depths, it's getting worse. And I've read this morning that there's not a lot of experts that think it's going to increase anytime soon.
Yeah, well, I'm hearing that it'll be 2020 before we even get back to $60 a barrel. So it's I think nobody has a crystal ball, but there's nothing that indicates it's going to be going up anytime soon.
So then, how has that fact changed the whole infrastructure of recycling post-consumer carpet in 2015?
Well, if you lay the price drop of the value of these materials in the marketplace on top of the fact that we've seen the significant growth in polyester, it continues to ramp up the challenges. I will tell you, in the last 6 months, we've lost 5 recyclers across the United States, and I'm concerned that we may lose more before all is said and done. That's despite the fact we've got a pretty strong subsidy program in California, and we also have the National Voluntary Product Stewardship Program, which is providing some relief to the collectors and sorters around the U.S. But these commodities are hard to move in the marketplace. When you get phone calls saying I have no orders, if I don't get some orders, I'm going to have to shut down my operations, things are tough. So one of the things we're going to do right now is we have a board meeting coming up on the 26th of January, and we've recast the format of the board meeting to spend most of our time specifically talking about these challenges and what we can do about them. I do want to say that it's not all doom and gloom, because we have a pretty robust list of technologies and products that we're trying to work on getting out there in the marketplace. The key hurdle on almost all of them are the economics. And while oil remains where it is, that's going to be a tough equation to balance.
Now, those projects that you mentioned, these are for products that would be made from post-consumer
carpet, either processing technologies that give you alternative output streams, different purities, different economics associated with those streams, or products that those materials that can go into looking for outlets in the marketplace. Yeah, that's what I'm referring to.
And that's really the future of this whole idea, isn't it?
It is. At the end of the day, there's no reason to collect these materials if you don't have outlets for them in the marketplace. So we have to educate people of what's available and why it's valuable and why it's smart from an environmental point of view to do this. We do have a product catalog on our website, if anybody's interested, that lists all the products that we're aware of that contain post-consumer carpet with contact information, how to get to the companies that produce those products. And I will tell you that we're in dialogue with a number of the states around the idea of the value of procurement. At the end of the day, there's a lot of money spent on public procurement. And to the extent we can use some of that money to buy these products, it helps create demand and pull through. And I don't mean to say that the entire challenge is going to be solved by the public procurement process, but it could be a major factor in helping us grow those outlets.
It seems like, and we've talked about this in years past, it seems like they've been slow on the uptake, even though some of these states were instrumental, in fact, instrumental in the birth of the CARE organization.
Yeah, there's no question about it. I think that, in honesty, I've been a little frustrated over the years that A lot of folks have looked for, asked for, demanded performance on the recycle side, but haven't really contributed very much to get there. The dialogue continues, but I think that maybe part of the problem is there's a lack of understanding or education exactly how hard it really is to do some of this. And now we need to work even harder than ever to explain to people the impact of the economics associated with the price of oil. I did show a chart out in California late last year at a meeting which showed the drop in the price of oil and the drop in the price of commodity polymers, virgin commodity polymers that compete with our recycled materials. And I think people, they raised their eyebrows for the first time, really began to get the coupling of those two and how devastating it can be when prices drop. I'm happy that it only costs me $18 to fill the tank on my Prius, but every time I do it, I think to myself, this is terrible because it's killing the recycling infrastructure in the United States and around the world. And it's having the same impact on renewable energy investments around the world.
And as we mentioned earlier, it's not going to be increasing anytime soon. At least it doesn't seem like it.
Yeah, I agree.
Now, as you mentioned, the most important element in this whole operation, the whole care operation, is finding applications for post-consumer carpet. How is that going before crude fell as much as it has? And I'm wondering what you just finished saying about the price of virgin polymer is so low. I can't imagine there's a lot of R&D people spending much time trying to use recycled product.
Yeah, there's a lot of truth to that. It's when the price of virgin materials fall as low as they have, it's pretty easy to say it's a cheaper alternative for me to go with this pretty clean, homogeneous material than it is to deal with some of the technical challenges I've got with the recycled material. In fact, I even heard a quote that there was some quotes on nylon 6 coming out of Europe that were less than the price that we could sell a recycled nylon 6 component from. And you still have the quality and the purity issues that you have to grapple with. So it is a big challenge. It's not going to go away anytime soon. The size of care, how has this affected the size of care, the throughputs, the number of collectors and processors that you have? You say there are fewer processors now, I guess, because of the price of oil. How has this affected the whole operation? Well, I would tell you that if you look at the annual report, which is available on the CARE website, you'll see that we reported 494 million pounds of post-consumer carpet collected. I call that gross collections in the United States last year. If you look at the bar charts, it'll say we're down a little bit versus 2013, but the fact of the matter is, within statistical error limits, the year was flat. We didn't see it really go up or down. What has happened is the markets for this material has contracted. So you've seen a couple things happen. One, we've got more material going to waste energy cement kiln outlets, which the collector sorters have to pay for to get it there. And number two, you've seen inventories build across the U.S. by many of these collectors. And it's not uncommon you have a phone call with somebody and they say, listen, I'm filled to the rafters with material. Can you help me with outlets? I've got no orders here. I'm going to have to turn off the inflow because I got no place to put it at this point in time. So yeah, we're seeing that. We've lost the 5 or 6 collectors that I mentioned earlier. I expect we'll probably lose some more as time goes on. We've lost some capacity in the United States with a major recycler of post-consumer nylon 6 shutting down a 100 million pound a year facility, and that really hasn't been offset by new capacity. So that's a big chunk of demand that disappeared.
That would be the Evergreen facility.
That's the Evergreen Augusta facility. Now Shaw, to give them credit, before they shut that facility down, they invested over $20 million to put a new operation in Ringgold, Georgia online. That facility is in startup mode right now. They're not up to their full capacity yet, so we have that gap between what disappeared and what's coming online, and that's put a strain on the system. We know that the Wellman organization, which is a big recycler here in the southeastern United States, was purchased by a Chinese organization early this year, and their demand for the nylons, both 6 and 6.6, has contracted since that acquisition took place. So that's taken some of the demand out of the marketplace as well.
Are there other major recyclers like that elsewhere around the country?
There's a handful of folks that I would put in the category of large volume recyclers. We have several mills, Shaw being one, Tandis being one, Interface being one. J&J's got operations going on. We've got some fiber producers like Universal and Aquafil, producing recycled, post-consumer derived recycled fiber that goes back into carpet, which is very powerful because that's closed loop recycling. We got some plastic companies around the U.S., N Green down in LaGrange, Georgia. You got some of the big plastic manufacturers. You've got on the West Coast, you've got LA Fibers, who produces a fiber pad through their Reliance Carpet Cushion establishment. Yeah. And you've got a company called Carpet Solutions that manufactures post-consumer products that mostly go back to China right now. So that's been another area where we've been hit hard with the Chinese economy slowed down. The demand for post-consumer plastics in general, carpet in particular in China, has virtually evaporated. That's put a lot of pressure also on the marketplace.
With the price of virgin falling like it has, the mills and the other players that you mentioned, do they back off somewhat on their recycling efforts?
I don't think we've seen any of the mills really back off yet, other than the fact that Shaw's shutdown of Evergreen has curtailed our demand for nylon 6. But I think the mills that are exercising leadership in this area have established their market positions with products that contain post-consumer carpet. And so they have to continue to do that to meet their expectations. So you've got nylon 6, a tiny bit of nylon 6/6, and there's a good recycling of post-consumer commercial tile taking place, both the polyolefin-backed tiles and the PVC-backed tiles. And the nice thing about tiles are they're 100% recyclable back into new tiles. So that's very positive.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Now, there are recyclers who are no longer with us, who are out of business. Mm-hmm. There are recyclers, as we speak, as you mentioned, that have inventory up to their rafters. So then they're not out there aggressively collecting like they had before. How is that affecting things?
Well, it's affecting things in a pretty big way. I mean, some of them they do jobs on a very limited basis. They're charging customers more for what they do take in because they're saying, I've got no outlets for this stuff. I need to charge you more to take it. Otherwise, I'll have to shut off your flow. For retailers that are relying on the recyclers to do that, they're reluctantly having to pay more to get that material taken off their hands. Some companies have their marketing materials out there to say that we send no carpet to landfill. So to honor that commitment, and we've got good, honest people out there trying to tackle these problems, they have to pay more to resolve it. There's more going, as I mentioned, to cement kilns and waste to energy, because at least you don't have to put it into the landfill if you do that. Which makes me also realize it's worth explaining that I think we need some relief from some of these state agencies around the fact that it's unacceptable to combust carpet. Waste energy is equivalent to landfill. Cement kilns is equivalent to landfill. It's not realistic in the environment that we're operating in today. It's not realistic because if we bring in 494 million pounds of carpet, not 100% of that could be recycled if we had a perfect marketplace out there. And so you have a choice. Do you send it to the landfill, or do you recover the energy embodied in that product and reduce its mass by 90+%, or in the case of a cement kiln, there's no residual because the calcium carbonate in the back of a carpet actually becomes the calcium oxide that's part of Portland cement. So you either refine or you mine calcium carbonate out of the earth, and that's done by strip mining mostly, or you can supplement some of that with the calcium carbonate that's recovered from the backing of the carpet.
So these are purists that are feeling this way? I mean, I know there's always been that.
Sure.
That group. Is that larger or smaller now than it was 5 years ago?
Well, I'd say the sustainability movement in general continues to grow. It ebbs and flows a little bit with environmental, with economic factors, but by and large, I think there's more activity on that frontier today than there was 10 years ago, certainly even 5 years ago. But maybe a dose of realism is starting to sink in there that, in fact, it is tough to recycle some of these materials, that we need to be a little more flexible in ways we handle them. We need to collaborate a little bit more about creating market demand for these materials. It's pretty easy to sit back in your green chair and just say, just pay more money for this or go do that.
Yeah.
But if you don't have to execute it, you don't realize how truly difficult it is to implement.
Well, the waste to energy option seems like a very good one to me, especially with warehouses filling up.
Absolutely. In fact, I was just on a conference call before you arrived here today talking about ways we can get carpet designated as a non-hazardous secondary fuel alternative. You know, its profile in terms of its emissions and what it contains is probably a whole lot better than coal and some of the fuel oils that are used. And so why not, instead of pumping this stuff out of the ground, why not use some of this to generate that power? There's some technologies out there that generally falls under the category of pyrolysis. Pyrolysis basically means you take a carbon, hydrogen, oxygen containing material and convert it into some useful byproduct. One of the examples is diesel. And I say, why don't we support pyrolysis? Because people are going to buy trillions of gallons of diesel every year. We have fleets that run our industries. Why not derive that diesel from a feedstock that is going to be buried back in the ground and has no value, as opposed to having to pump all that oil, transport it halfway around the earth and go through that big refining process, when we could supplement some of that with
And there are
diesel
roadblocks to doing that exist.
Yeah, there are roadblocks in terms of acceptability because it's viewed as combustion by many people, or in this case, there's also some economic challenges. A robust pyrolysis unit is going to cost you about $20 million a year. And you know, that's the kind of investment we have to make in terms of solving these problems going forward if we're going to be successful.
But again, with the price of crude where it is,
Yeah.
that's difficult.
Tough.
I've got you.
Dave, I do want to mention that I kind of referred to it earlier, though, that of all the 494 million pounds that we collected last year, about 23% of that actually is formally recycled. And of that 23%, almost 20% of that material goes back into carpet. So that's a pretty significant technical accomplishment to be able to do that. And I think that's something that we need to make people aware of, that the industry invested over the last 10 years literally hundreds of millions of dollars to figure out how to take an old carpet and turn it back into a new carpet, closing the loop, if you will. We can't do it all that way, but it's a pretty significant increment. 20% of what does get recycled goes back to carpet.
And that's been increasing each year, that percentage.
Increasing each year, right.
Well, that's something you obviously are quite proud of and should be.
Very proud of it. The industry should be proud of that because they're the ones that made this happen.